Hey, technical difficulties behind us. Welcome back. Okay, so we're ready to get going here again. I hope everybody enjoyed their cookies. So that's basically, we've gone over what I consider the pro-choice legal side, the way they would most want to be represented, I hope. In Barack Obama's address at Notre Dame, he called, and we begin our book with these words, he called for open hearts, open minds, and fair-minded words. And that's what I've tried to do in this lecture series, and also that's the idea of the book, open hearts, fair-minded words, so that people get their say, get their side presented the way they would want it to be presented. And then you can look at both sides and compare and contrast and come to your own understanding. So the pro-life legal says we want to protect the preborn child's right to life. Recognize the preborn as full, small persons. Full, small persons. We understand your achievement view, that you want persons to function, that you want rational thought, consciousness, self-awareness, the desire to continue in existence. That's all well and good. But in order for somebody to start to function as a person, it first has to have the being of a person. And the child in the womb has that being. That's why it eventually begins to function as a person. So recognize that. Recognize it as a full, small, not yet functioning person. Don't impose a death sentence on the child. Recall often cruel, painful methods. Keep that in mind. Don't lose sight of that. Legal abortion is discrimination. It segregates an entire class of persons. It says born children count and preborn children do not count. That's discrimination. We aren't a country that wants to discriminate when it comes to persons, but yet this is a case of discrimination. And yes, this idea of safe, legal, and rare is interesting, but abortion is not safe for the child. Abortion is not safe for the child. Every abortion is the same back alley horror for the child. Every abortion. You don't like this back alley horror? You don't like death that looks like this? But this is the reality for every child, every preborn child in the act of abortion. That's how they wind up, looking just like the woman on the front of this that we're so horrified by. So no, every abortion is the same back alley situation for the child. The government must protect the right of the preborn person to live. The government cannot be neutral. Not only it should not be neutral, it cannot be neutral. Because somebody's rights are at stake here. Somebody's rights are at stake. Not just a right to have your life the way you want it. Yes, we'd all like to have our lives the way we want them, but that doesn't always work out. Yes, we'd like to have the woman have her life exactly the way they want it, but sometimes things in life don't work out. But far more important than having your life the way you want it exactly is having your life. Yeah, life is important. Quality of life is important, yes. But you can't get quality of life until you have life. You can't get quality of life until you have life. And so the government has to look at this, and people should want the government to protect this. And the government cannot be neutral on this. So it's interesting. Often we hear people say, what? The government should just stay out of it, right? The government should just stay out of it. But isn't it interesting? Both sides are saying no. Shouldn't stay. Not only the government shouldn't stay out of it, the government cannot stay out of it. The government cannot be neutral. Both sides want protection from the government. If the government stays out of it, that is essentially pro-choice. Do whatever you want. Picture if the government stayed out of slavery. Just stay out of the matter. you want a slave, you have a slave. If you don't want a slave, don't have a slave. If the government stayed out of child abuse, if the government stayed out of whether you have to stop at a stop sign or not. See, the government cannot stay out of moral issues. The government cannot stay out of moral issues. And yet all the time, for 40 years, we have heard you shouldn't legislate morality. But what do we legislate? What do we legislate? If you don't legislate morality, 90% of our laws are gone. If you don't legislate morality, there's not many laws left that don't have to do with morality. Almost all laws are about morality. So this is a strange thing to say you shouldn't legislate morality. Pro-life and pro-choice both have to look at this statement. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, maybe they're talking about internal things like gratitude. I mean, morally, if somebody does something nice for you, morally, you should be grateful, right? You should be grateful, but we can't legislate that. We can't force you to be grateful. If you're not grateful, you're going to jail for a year. Well, we can't legislate that, and that's morality. You should be forgiving. If you're not forgiving, we're going to impose a fine on you. Well, obviously, we can't do that. So what do we mean when we say most laws are about morality? Well, external actions concerning others are all either legal or not legal. External actions that involve other people are either legal to do or illegal to do. The government is involved in external actions. I'm personally opposed to abortion. I'm personally opposed to abortion. I would never have an abortion, but I don't want to impose my beliefs on another, so I believe abortion should be legal. I don't want to impose morality, my morality, on other people. And how many times have we heard this? I'm personally opposed. I'm personally opposed. I would never have an abortion, but who am I to tell somebody else what to do? Who am I to tell somebody else what to do? And here's how the two positions react to the statement. Pro-choice says absolutely, exactly. That's exactly, this fits into our position. Keep abortion legal. Keep it legal. Your views, you're more than welcome to your views on abortion. For whatever reason you have your views, for whatever reason that you're personally opposed, that's great. You're welcome to be personally opposed. Just don't push your views on everybody in the society that might have a different view. Keep your view to yourself. This is great. You're personally opposed. We love that. That's the way it should be. Keep your personal opposition to yourself. You don't like abortion? Don't have one. Don't have one. But stay out of my opinion. And stay out of trying to make the law against what I want to do or someone besides you wants to do. It's good to be personally opposed, says pro-choice. That's fine with us. Just don't oppose it on anybody else. Keep it legal. That way everybody's happy. Pro-choice absolutely agrees with this. But pro-life says, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Why are you personally opposed? Why are you personally opposed? Is it because you think it's a baby? Is that why you're personally opposed? If that's why you're personally opposed, pro-choice just wants to ask, then why do you not favor protecting this baby like any other baby? Why are you personally opposed? And because you think it's a baby, but you wouldn't want to protect babies. It's a very odd sort of situation to be in. I'm personally opposed to slavery. I would never own a slave, but I don't want to impose my beliefs on others. So I believe slavery should be legal. This is what pro-life is going to say that the abortion statement is like. I'm personally opposed to slavery. I personally would never own a slave, but I'm not going to impose that view on others. Pro-life says this is an exact parallel. This is an exact parallel to the abortion issue. Pro-choice says no, it's not. Pro-choice says it's more like saying, I'm personally opposed to smoking. I would never smoke, but I don't want to impose my beliefs on others, so I believe smoking should be legal. Except we have a problem here, because even with smoking, smoking has been legally limited when it what? Affects somebody else. Affects somebody else. If the being in the womb is a person, if the being in the womb is a person, then it's more like slavery than smoking. If it is a person, it's more like the slavery example than the smoking example because it involves another person. So this I'm personally opposed to abortion, I want to take a little bit longer look at because so many people say it. Pro-life people say it and pro-choice people say it. I've heard so many people that consider themselves personally pro-life, but they want it legal. They are against it morally, so that's the shift between the moral and the legal. Although our hope would always be that the legal is rooted in the moral. But here there seems to be a disconnect between the two. I'm personally opposed. I would never have an abortion. Well, maybe this is understandable if it's based on feelings. If it's based on feelings. So picture somebody saying, I would never own I feel like owning a slave is just kind of icky. You know, owning slaves doesn't set well with me. It just doesn't seem like a nice thing to do. It's kind of doesn't set well with me. So I would never own a slave. But if you want to own a slave, that's fine. On some personal feelings, mentality, that somehow makes some sense. This slavery thing, it just doesn't seem to be good. But if you want to own one, go for it. Okay? On a feelings level, you can sort of rationalize this thing. But if you're, after considering the evidence, either against abortion or against slavery, if your real thought is, I'm personally opposed to abortion, I would never have an abortion because I believe it's a little baby, but you go ahead and have one. That's sort of like, that's exactly like saying, I would never own a slave because I believe blacks are persons in the fullest sense of the word. They are persons. I would never do something to a person as degrading as slavery. But if you want to own one, go for it. That doesn't make sense. That's a horrible disconnect. That's a horrible disconnect of logic. So if it's based on feelings of ickiness, I just don't like this, I just don't have a good feeling about this, but you have the right to do it, then you can understand the disconnect between the moral and the legal. Because it's not really a moral issue. It's just kind of an icky feeling. But if you take a stand against abortion on a moral level, it's a baby. I would never have an abortion. The black person is human and fully a person. I would never own a slave. And then to turn around and say, but it should be legal for someone else, is a huge mental disconnect that everyone who makes a statement needs to take a look at, because the legal is rooted in the moral. So what's happening here? Pro-life people and pro-choice people who make this statement in well-meaning statement need to take a look at what is this disconnect that's happening here. And not only that, but it's at odds with the court. I'm personally opposed. I would never have an abortion, but I don't want to impose my beliefs on others, so I believe abortion should be legal. You can't have pro-choice alone. Even the court said you can allow it only because it's morally justified, or not allow it because it's not morally justified. Personally opposed is completely at odds with Roe v. Wade, because the court said if it's a person, if it's a little baby, then it's protected by the 14th Amendment. So even Roe v. Wade doesn't like this statement about I'm personally opposed. I think it's a baby. But if you want to have an abortion, that's fine. Even Roe v. Wade is saying, no, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. So again, we need to look at that. We need to be perfectly clear why it doesn't work, because so many people say it. It's an impossible moral straddling of the fence. If you're really opposed to abortion, well, then work to protect the child. If you're really not opposed to abortion, then work to protect choice. But personally opposed, but everyone else should be able to do it, is what I call a poor, weak, inadequate foundation and illogical thinking moral mess for thinking, I think abortion should be legal. It's just an absolute quagmire of illogical thinking. And both pro-choice and pro-life people who make this statement need to see and take a look at this, because it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There are reasons to hold pro-life, and I hope I've given you a lot of them in these 4 nights. There are reasons to hold pro-choice. I hope you take a look at them and understand what they are. But to say I place myself outside of a moral horror that I would never even consider, while suggesting it should be open to others and legally protected, is a statement of insanity. It's a complete statement of insanity, yet people say this all the time. It's time everybody who says this takes a look at it. I place myself outside of what I consider a moral horror, something I would never, ever do, ever. Yet I want it to be legal for other people. Why wouldn't you do it? Oh, because it's a baby. Well, then why would you want someone else to do this to a baby? So this is something that has to be looked at. Has to be looked at, because it's said, like I said, by both pro-choice and pro-life people. People that are personally pro-life. What does legal abortion mean? Pro-life says it renders an entire class of persons as non-persons. Entire class of persons, entire preborn human beings as non-persons. And it says the use of the term fetus rather than preborn baby is a frequent tactic to allow killing unwanted members of society. You call them something. You don't call it a baby if you want to kill it. You call it a fetus. And you hold on to that word. It's not a baby. It's a fetus. It allows men, legal abortion allows men no say whatsoever in the abortion decision, even if they are married to the woman and the father of the child. And a lot of people don't realize that. If you're married to the woman and you're the father of the child, you still have absolutely no say. No say. So it discriminates against men completely, even though they seem, from what I've heard, to have something to do with the coming about of the being in the womb. They're somehow connected to its existence. Yet once it's there, they have absolutely no say. And yet, interesting, on the legal issue, once the being in the womb is born, takes its first breath, and becomes what? Citizen. The man has full legal parental responsibility. Full legal parental responsibility for child support. So this is a mess. This is an extreme discrimination against men, says pro-life. Pro-choice says no. It guarantees in the law the full right of women to make their own individual decisions regarding a pregnancy. Reproductive freedom. Reproductive freedom. Respects the dignity of women. Reproductive freedom. It allows full autonomy, just like men have. Men aren't discriminated against. With abortion rights, women just get to catch up with men and level the playing field. Men don't have to deal with pregnancy. They never have their career interrupted, their life interrupted by a pregnancy. Why should a woman have that? Now, a woman has full autonomy, just like men have, levels the playing field. No, it's not discrimination against men. We just catch up with them. Yes?
The sad part of this is that when we're at church on Sunday, 30% of the women who are in church have likely had an abortion, and 80% of the young men and young women of age have likely been using contraception. And many of them ascribe to this reproductive freedom kind of argument. And I think this is important for us to understand and to pray that we can have the right words to try to help these people come to the senses regarding an omission of responsibility that they don't see they're guilty.
Well, the pro-choice side would say is that men always have no responsibility. The man can always walk away, but the woman can't. The woman can't. She's going to be the one stuck there dealing with the pregnancy. Whether she aborts or carries a term or whatever, she's the one who's going to be stuck. A man can always walk. So we just want to level the playing field. So we're talking, that's what reproductive freedom is about. Women having the same freedom that men always have. That men always have. They never have to worry about pregnancy. They never have to make this decision. So we don't quite level the playing field because the woman still has to deal with an abortion. But at least long term, we level the playing field. So that's what pro-choice would say. Discrimination. Both sides are claiming that abortion is either discrimination or lack of abortion is discrimination. Pro-life, legal abortion renders an entire group, the preborn, is not equal to born. It says they do not count as persons. This affects both preborn men and women. It leaves them with no right to life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. Their life is at the whim of someone else's will. Outlawing abortion allows for equality of all persons. Outlawing abortion allows for equality of all persons. And pro-choice says illegal abortion renders an entire group of people, women, as not equal to men. That's what happens when you outlaw abortion. Women are now not equal to men. Men do not have to deal with pregnancy and its short and long-term burdens, and neither should women have to. Women's pursuit of happiness is an unalienable right. An unalienable right. We're going to come back to that. Only legal abortion allows for equality between men and women. So one says outlawing abortion allows for equality of all persons, and the other side wants the same thing. Legal abortion allows for equality between men. So that's the two forms looking at it as discrimination. Both sides are claiming discrimination. We don't want discrimination. It's like nobody wants discrimination. That's the two views of it. So I decided to take a look on the topic of discrimination, not from the pro-life side or the pro-choice side, but just sort of from the CDC side, the Center for Disease Control. And this was interesting because this has come out more and more in the literature. The report found that between 2007 and 2010, nearly 36% of all abortions in the U.S. were performed on Black children, even though Blacks make up only about 13% of the population. So we have a problem here. Wait a minute. It seems like there's another kind of discrimination going on. It's another kind of discrimination. Furthermore, abortion kills more Black Americans than, well, they're not Americans yet. They haven't taken that one breath. But more Black Americans, assuming that they're in the United States, than 7 leading causes of death combined. So again, is there some kind of discrimination going around here? Another 21% of abortions were performed on Hispanics, and an additional 7% on other minority races. And I just learned that 60% of all Planned Parenthood clinics are in minority areas. So some people in the Black community, especially Dr. Oveda King, has said, what's going on here? Is this some other kind of discrimination that everybody needs to look at? Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, there seems to be a different kind of discrimination around here, targeting minorities. And she says the most obvious practitioner of racism in the United States today is Planned Parenthood. That's a pretty strong statement. That's a pretty strong statement. So both sides need to look at, is there some other kind of discrimination happening in the abortion clinics? besides the discrimination that the two sides are worried about? Besides, is there something else happening here? And obviously something else is happening here. When these populations seem to be making, which are minorities, are a majority of abortions. We need to take a look at that. So legal diagonals. Last time we talked about the moral diagonals, but the legal diagonals of Pascal's wager can be done the same. So here we have the being in the womb is a person, abortion, being in the womb is a person. So abortion should be illegal, so that's if we get it right. The being in the womb is not a person, then abortion should be legal. Again, if that's the case, we get it right. But if we're in doubt, the way the Supreme Court said we were in doubt, then there's two ways of going wrong. The two ways, if we get it right, okay, so if we get it, I mentioned the two if we get it right, but what if we get it wrong? Because the Supreme Court said we were in doubt. So we have two possible ways of going wrong. We deny a woman's actual right to choose abortion, or we deny a child the right to live. Those are the two possible ways of going wrong. Those are the two ways of going wrong. And you've got to ask, which is worse? Is one worse than the other? Is one worse than the other? Or are they equal? Usually in Pascal's wager, one is worse than the other. They're usually not equal. And the question is, which one? Which is the worst denial? Pro-choice says, legal abortion is basically safe. Legal abortion is basically safe. And to keep it safe, it must be legal. To keep it safe, we must be legal. We certainly do not want to return to this. We certainly do not want to return to this. Illegal abortions tend to be unsafe, sometimes even killing the woman. Women will seek abortions no matter what the law says, resort to self or back alley abortions again, regardless of your moral view. Regardless of your moral view, keep abortion safe and legal and rare. And rare. We'll talk more about rare. Because why do you want it rare if it's no big deal? But we'll look at that. But this is the main idea. Abortion is basically safe. Keep it that way. If it's legal, it'll be safe. Pro-life says, ask the question, is abortion safe? No, it's not safe. First of all, abortion is absolutely not safe for the child. They die most of the time. A few of them survive, but most of them, now that the techniques have been refined, they die. We don't usually have complications of live births anymore. Furthermore, pro-life says abortion is not safe for women. Abortion is physically unsafe for women. Women die from safe, legal abortions. Women die from safe, legal abortions. There's a lower percent, but higher numbers. And abortion is psychologically, mentally, and emotionally bad for women. Depression, suicide, and to make matters worse, abortion can lead to infertility. And we talked about that a little bit last night. The cervix is tight shut to hold a baby in. And you go in there and you stuff it with cotton and you pry it open and you dig around in there and you form scar tissue and you weaken those muscles. And then if either you can't get pregnant again, possibly because of scarring. I mean, look at the infertility rates in this country. Look at the infertility rates. Some of it is definitely connected to abortion. You've got all this scar tissue. But furthermore, if you don't have scar tissue in the 3rd month of pregnancy, when baby starts to gain weight in a subsequent pregnancy that a woman wants, those muscles that are supposed to be tight and hold baby in are weakened. And as soon as baby starts to gain weight, it just breaks through and there's miscarriage. So that's a problem with infertility later on. Are all women made infertile by abortions? Absolutely not. But it is a problem. It is a possibility. So pro-life says abortion isn't safe. It's not safe for the baby, and maybe it's not even safe for the woman. So we handed out this NARAL flyer, which is actually they no longer produce this flyer, but it was handed out for a long time. And it made the statement, criminal and self-induced abortions in the US once numbered over 1 million a year. 1 million a year. Because desperate women will go to any length to secure an abortion, even if it means facing death, maiming, or criminal penalty. Whenever the right to legal abortion is restricted, women are forced into underground butchery. Do we want to return to that? Well, it's very interesting that Barack Obama called for open hearts, open minds, and fair-minded words. Fair-minded words. And I have to ask, are these fair-minded words? Bernard Nathanson, who was an abortionist who performed thousands of abortions, and then decided that he was no longer comfortable. He started to think that this was a child. He started to look at what was being aborted. And later he, in his book, Aborting America, states, how many deaths were we, because he also, I believe he was involved with starting NARAL, the National Rights Abortion League. I believe he was its founder.
He was, he and Larry Later.
Yes. So he started, so this is what his statement later in Aborting America states, how many deaths were we talking about when abortion was illegal? In NARAL, we generally emphasize the drama of the individual case, not the mass statistics. But when we spoke of the latter, it was always 5,000 to 10,000 deaths a year. I confess that I knew these figures were totally false, but in the morality of our revolution, it was a useful figure, widely accepted, so why go out of our way to correct it with honest statistics? Statistics on abortion deaths were fairly reliable. In 1967, the federal government listed only 160 deaths from illegal abortion. In 1972, the total was 39 deaths. In an average year before legalization, the actual total was probably closer to 500.
Total abortions?
Total deaths, from maternal deaths from illegal abortion. So if 10,000 is totally false, we have to ask, what about the million that were mentioned here? 1 million a year. 1 million a year. Once numbered over 1 million a year. So I want to say to the pro-choice side in this statement, those aren't fair-minded words. Those aren't fair-minded words. And so often we hear we don't want to go back to back alley abortions and have millions of women dying. And where is this coming from? From a statistic that's simply untrue. So we need to look at that. Both sides need to look at that. That statistic is simply not even near true. Told to us from someone who was involved in the making of that brochure. So maternal deaths, the Center for Disease Control tells us, in 2013, 8 women nationwide died from legal abortions in 2010, the last year that statistics were available. The number of women killed at abortion facilities in 2009 was 8, declined significantly from 2008 when 12 women died. A total of 411 women have died at the hands of legally recognized abortionists since Roe v. Wade and Doe versus Bolton legalized most abortions. So that's an average of just about 12 women a year since the Twin Court decreed that abortion was safe and legal. Safe and legal. We know of, on the books, 411 women who have died from safe, legal abortion. Safe, legal abortion. And beforehand, the total was about 500. Beforehand, the total was 500. We hear a lot about informed consent. And pro-life says women have the right. Informed consent means that when a woman goes in to have an abortion, she's told what the procedure is going to be, what exactly is going to happen to her, and the risks involved, and the status of the being in the womb that's being removed. She's given all the information. And pro-life says women have the right to be informed. Women have the right to be informed about the nature of the procedure and the status of the being in the womb before undergoing an abortion. Pro-life says women are intellectually capable of making a rational, informed decision. Pro-life thinks that women are capable of making a rational, informed decision. Women are capable of making rational, informed decisions. That's what pro-life thinks. Are they sure about this? That a woman can make a rational, informed decision? Pro-life says, pro-choice says, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because they're in the middle of a horrible situation. A woman going for an abortion is in the middle of a horrible decision. She's already traumatized. She's already traumatized. And you're worried about her right to make a rational, informed decision? Well, she's got a bigger right than that. She's got a higher right than that. She has a right not to be traumatized anymore. She has a right not to be traumatized anymore. Traumatized by your information you want to give her. Traumatized about the procedure. Traumatized about the status of the being in the womb. That is only going to make matters emotionally worse for her. Like, what are you thinking? You're worried about rational, informed decisions when she's traumatized? Give the woman a break. The woman is already distraught, and she knows what she wants. And the only purpose of your informed consent is try to badger her into what you want her to do. When she's distraught, you're worried about rational, informed decisions. She's traumatized. Leave her alone. This isn't a time for rational, informed decisions. Think about her feelings. Think about her feelings. The interesting thing here is that both sides know that informed consent lowers the abortion rate. Informed consent lowers the abortion rate. When you do a sonogram and you show the woman, this is what you're aborting, this is the status, the abortion rate goes down. Sometimes she says, you know what, I don't think I want to do that. I've changed my mind. But wait a minute, aren't you traumatized? But I've changed my mind. You don't really want to change your mind and make an informed, rational decision. We're probably badgering you into this. What's going on here? Both sides know that informed consent lowers the abortion rate. Wouldn't both sides want the abortion rate lowered? Wouldn't both sides want the abortion rate lowered if you want abortion to be safe, legal, and rare? So what's going on here? So I want to look at these splits. You know, for the purpose of this course and the purpose of the book, although we do, I believe it's brought up in the book a little bit, we use the terms pro-life and pro-choice. But there's splits. It's a little bit more complicated, and it's probably even more complicated than I have it here, but I want at least to make people aware of these splits. There's people that are full pro-life. No one should ever have an abortion, period. What I call full pro-life. And then there's what I call pro-life with exceptions. Many people are pro-life with exceptions. The hard cases, life of the mother, rape, incest, handicapped children. So other than that, abortion for convenience, they wouldn't want. But what we call these hard cases, that's got to be left up to the woman. Life of the mother, rape, incest, severely handicapped child. So this is what this group of people are pro-life with exceptions. And then there's what I call personal pro-life. I'm personally opposed. Not me, not me. I wouldn't have an abortion, but it has to be legal for others. PO, personally opposed. So they would consider themselves pro-life, just on the moral level, but not legally pro-life. So again, this is a different case. And then there's pro-choice. This is what that became very interesting at the Life and Choice Conference at Princeton in 2010. It was a huge group of pro-choice people that are, for the first 20 weeks, they're pro-choice. This is on the moral level. For the first 20 weeks, they're pro-choice. But after that, they're pro-life. That's that amazing common ground that I discussed last night on the moral. I got that little word moral stuck in over there. So they're half pro-choice and half pro-life. And yet they're still thrown into the pro-choice thing, but they're on the pro-life side halfway through pregnancy. Common ground there. Then there's what I call full pro-choice, legal and moral. Abortion is a necessary evil. It should be safe, legal, and rare, but it's necessary. It's morally okay all the way through. It's legally, it should be protected all the way through. Full pro-choice, legal, and moral. But then there's a third group that I call full pro-abortion, moral, and legal. And this is a group that's becoming more vocal recently. Abortion should not be safe, legal, and rare because it's a good. See, this group here believes it's a necessary evil. And generally in the past 40 years, abortion has been discussed as a necessary evil. I mean, Hillary Clinton wants it safe, legal, and rare. But this group says, why do you want it to be rare? It's a good. It's a good. So when a woman is traumatized, you don't want to have informed consent because her reasons for being traumatized are legitimate reasons. And those things will go away, those problems will go away if she has an abortion because abortion is good. So this group doesn't want her to have informed consent because she's doing the right thing. Why confuse matters? Why confuse matters? So it's not quite as simple as pro-life and pro-choice. A lot of gradations here. So often somebody will put themselves, they will say I'm pro-life or pro-choice. It's a good idea when you're talking to people to say, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because if they're pro-life, they might be in one of these first three categories. And if they're pro-choice, they might be in one of the bottom four categories. It's very interesting. So when somebody says I'm pro-life or pro-choice, and you start talking to each other, you could be talking past each other because you know which group you're in. So it's really good to clarify your terms, and that's why I show you these things. So if when you're speaking with each other, you're dialoguing with each other, find out what you mean when somebody says, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-choice. It may be more complicated than you think. I think I'm going to end there for tonight. What's that? Yeah, I just looked at that. So I just looked at I'm going to stop for the night. I'm going to talk about David Reardon tomorrow. Some of you may be familiar with him. So tomorrow night is what's called the Unity Way, trying to, at least on some level, combine pro-life and pro-choice interests. And then I will talk about my own personal story as executive director of a woman-to-woman pregnancy agency for women with unwanted pregnancies, 20 years and thousands of women. And I'd like to share some of those stories, both in the agency and then some personal stories from my own family with you tomorrow night. So thank you very much.